Welcome back to Let It Rip. On the panel, the police chief of the great city of Detroit, James Craig, Free Press columnist Rochelle Riley, Fox 2 reporter Charlie LaDuff, and activist Malik Shabazz. Of course, attorney Charlie Langton. Charlie, let me bring you into this conversation. Attorney General Eric Holder went to Ferguson. He's now left, but he promised a thorough investigation. Meanwhile, there are black leaders calling for the county prosecutor there to remove himself from the case because his father was killed by a black man when he was 12 years old. Should the county prosecutor recuse himself? Can he still be objective despite what happened in his family?
No, I think that's a little thing. I think that would send yet another shock wave that there's a victory by someone here. There's an underlining problem in Ferguson, and I think the chief's right. Going back to '67 in Detroit, I remember driving through Detroit in '67. I was afraid. It was a tough time, and it took a long time to get out of that. There's no, it's for me, from my point of view, it doesn't seem like there's any trust in Ferguson between the authorities and the regular people on the streets. When that happens, there's going to be chaos. This was a shooting. I don't know. Let's get the facts in. I don't know what happened on that day, but something sparked something there. There's an underlining problem there, which I think is obvious, and it just catapulted into this disaster. There's no reason to loot. There's no reason to perceive crime by doing some criminal act. It doesn't work.
But Chief, is there
but
also...
what do we know? We got to talk about what we know.
We don't
know much, right?
What we do know.
But is there any reason, though, Chief, too, as some have speculated and criticized the police in Ferguson for donning militarized equipment? We saw weapons there, body armor there, that we might only see in a war zone. Is that what should be done?
I don't know of any major city that doesn't have an SRT or SWAT deployment, and there's not armored vehicles used as part of that deployment.
And Detroit
for
has
good
its
reasons. I mean, when you talk about an active shooter, when you talk about a barricaded suspect, this is about the business of keeping our officers safe and keeping our community safe. Do we want to put our men and women in harm's way? It's more about relationship. We have an armored vehicle. We have a SWAT vehicle. I talked about our 9 operations. When we're driving into a neighborhood and we have our officers outside dressed in military-style garb, people are cheering. Why is that, Charles? Why is that? You know why? Because people know we're there to assist and help them.
It doesn't scare people?
But, it probably scares the bad guys, and as it should. But what went wrong? What we know factually, lack of transparency. An inability to communicate with the media early on. One thing, my takeaway from Cincinnati, we talked about the 15 African-American men that were shot. One thing we learned in Cincinnati, and during my tenure as chief, whenever there was an officer-involved shooting incident, we communicated to that community within 24 hours about the facts. 24 hours, this is not about being Hollywood. This is about communicating the facts as best we can to our community, and that builds trust. That's why that's so critical. How about this? Detroit, 3 months ago, a 13-year-old young man who tried to rob at gunpoint an off-duty DPD sergeant. There was a shooting. The young man was shot. I arrive at the scene. Tragic. He survived. Fortunately, people in the community approached me, thanked the DPD for the job we're doing. Would that happen in other places when there's no relationship?
Yeah, but Detroit, sir, is not going down like that. Look, let's say it's not Ferguson, Charlie. I'm sorry. Everybody wake up. It's boiling out there. It's boiling in America. There's
Absolutely.
no bread. No bread. Well, USA Today, since they want to keep projecting this out, they don't tell you 60% of the people that are killed by cops are white. This is a trailer parks issue. If you look at that Cliven Bundy guy, remember him? The guy out in Nevada, the rancher, who showed up and started pointing guns at police. The trailer park. So we got a very large disconnect as people start losing their incomes. The only time they run into government was when the government is an authority figure. They don't feel like they're being helped. They feel lost. That's what's going on. It happens to be a bigger swath of the black community than the white, but it's a nationwide problem.
The white people rioted, though, in Ferguson?
They rioted in Nevada, Charlie. They pulled guns on the police.
It, but what about Ferguson,
White people riot over championship games. Loot, torn over cars, knock people upside the head, grab liquor bottles.
Oh.
The people in Ferguson, and I don't justify looting, but it's racism, it's classism, it's oppression, it's recession, it's depression. 12 years ago, the unemployment rate in Ferguson was 5%. Today, it's over 12%. And it's also a sense of hopelessness. We as a society are failing to instill hope and legitimate opportunities to our young people.
St. Louis is a segregated place.
Let me tell you, when you first asked me this question, I don't answer questions that are for God or police chiefs, because you don't know what will happen. You can't predict a lot of things. There are trends that you can predict, and Chief, I'm glad you can do that. Let me tell you why some people loot, and my biggest problem is it's not everybody, so I don't want to hear people saying black people loot. I've never looted. Nobody in my family has looted. But I do know of people I've spoken to about why they do those things. It is their way of getting attention, of getting things they could never get otherwise, because nobody cares that they don't have jobs, that they can't read, that they can't get into federal job training programs because adult illiteracy is so bad in wherever they are in America, because that problem is not just in Detroit. They get heard. People pay attention. Do they still need to get arrested? Yes, but
that's what
like
they were
Minister
saying to
Shabazz
me.
says, there is a rage. There is a sense of nobody cares what's happening with me, that people are lashing out. But what you don't get, and what some of the stories didn't tell, but my friend Wesley Lowery from the Washington Post wrote about, was there were people who were telling them, don't loot, don't throw things. The police threw tear gas at them, and some of them threw tear gas canisters back. It's not everybody. But if you don't deal with those somebodies that's a problem for, you're going to have an even bigger problem. My second problem is with the word policing as a verb. I don't like it. What I'm hoping the chief is doing is creating partnerships between the community and the officers. I'll let you do that because you are doing that. But when you use words like policing and corralling and dealing with people in a way that it's like they're animals, which is what happened that first night in Ferguson. You're talking about 200 people and 10 looting. Went to 1,500 people, nobody looted.
And let's always remember that. There was a minority doing that.
Yes.
And there is another side to this story. There is a police officer involved, Darren Wilson, who until 12 days ago was a father, a family man, a decorated officer. He says he now has to live in fear, a prisoner somewhere we don't know. And he says that he was hurt too by this incident. Still to come, Charlie takes the show on the road. Can we ever find justice? Stay with us.